Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Green Bay Packers at the Oakland Raiders in their Week 15 matchup played December 20th, 2015. We're going to go over every possession, the stats, and give our breakdown and analysis for this game as the Packers were looking to keep pace and keep their lead in the NFC North over the Vikings. And Oakland needed a win or else they would be eliminated from playoff contention. So the Packers got the ball first. They went 3 and out on their first possession, and then the Raiders would end up punting after 7 plays on their first possession. Green Bay got the ball back, and they went 3 and out for the second consecutive possession to start this game. And now Oakland would take over after the punt on their own 16. And on 3rd and 9 from the 17, Derek Carr was intercepted by Micah Hyde. And now Green Bay would take over on the Oakland 17. They did get a penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. But now in the red zone to start this possession, they would get a first down to bring it up to the 5-yard line. And on 2nd and goal, John Kuhn scored on a 5-yard touchdown run. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and it was 7-0 Green Bay over Oakland with about 5 minutes still left in the first. And now on the first play of the next possession for the Raiders, Damarious Randall intercepts Derek Carr and runs it back 43 yards for the pick six. Crosby adds the extra point, and it was now 14-0 as the Green Bay Packers scored 14 points in less than 20 seconds. So they come up big time here, actually 15 seconds to be exact. And so now it was a 14-0 lead. The Raiders would take over on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff. They brought the ball to midfield, and they got down into the red zone all the way down to the 6-yard line as they brought the first quarter to a close. And they would end up getting up to the 5-yard line on that final play of the first quarter with a 1-yard run by Murray. But they would not be able to get it into the end zone, and they would have to settle for a 23-yard field goal on the second play of the second quarter as they put their first points on the scoreboard to cut the Packers' lead to 11 as Green Bay led 14-3 with just seconds into the second quarter. The Packers would end up punting after 4 plays on their next possession, and now the Raiders would take over on their own 22, and they got into Green Bay territory when on 3rd and 3 from the 39, Latavius Murray ran it 22 yards to the Green Bay 39 for the first down. Then on 2nd and 5 from the 34, Carr hit Crabtree for a 23-yard reception to make it a first down in the red zone at the 11-yard line, but they would end up losing a yard on 2nd down, and they would be forced to settle for a 30-yard field goal by Sebastian Janikowski, as it was now an 8-point game with the score Green Bay 14, Oakland 6, with about 8.5 minutes left before halftime. The Packers would end up punting after 5 plays on their next possession, and they would hold the Raiders to a 3 and out on the possession that followed by Oakland. And now the Packers would take over, backed up against their own end zone on their own 2-yard line, but they would get out of the shadow of their end zone, and they would end up getting into Oakland territory. But on 2nd and 2 from the Oakland 32, Starks fumbled the ball. Maiawa forced the fumble and recovered. And it ended up being challenged. They actually reviewed it. It was under 2 minutes. And so it did stand. And Oakland would take over on their own 21 after the fumble. And on first down, Derek Carr went to Marcel Reese. The fullback picked up 29 yards in the first down at the 50. And then Carr went to Rivera. The tight end picked up 14 yards and a first down at the 36. Carr then scrambled for 17 yards and a first down in the red zone at the Green Bay 19. And Carr throws it to Amari Cooper. And it's a 19-yard touchdown pass. Sebastian Janikowski adds the extra point. And the Raiders score 13 straight points in the second quarter after being down 14-0 to make it a 1-point game with the score Green Bay 14, Oakland 13 with less than half a minute left before halftime. So Green Bay would bring the first half to a close. And now in the second half, to start things off, the Raiders would get the ball first, but the Packers would end up sacking Carr on 2nd down. Julius Peppers with the sack. and so it was a 3-and-out would end up being the result of the first possession of the second half for Oakland, as they would punt the ball to Green Bay, who would take over at midfield at the 50. They got down into the red zone, but their drive stalled on the 6-yard line, and out came Mason Crosby to attempt a 24-yard field goal. He hit the chip shot, and that extended the Packers' lead to 4 with the score Green Bay 17, Oakland 13, with still over 10 minutes left in the third quarter. So now Oakland would take over on their own 19-yard line after the kickoff, and on 2nd and 10 from the 19, Derek Carr went to Amari Cooper for a 41-yard reception. It was now first down at the 40 of Green Bay for the Raiders, and they would actually be faced with a 4th and 1 at the Green Bay 31. They went for it, and Latavius Murray brings it ahead 3 yards for the first down at the 28. And then on 2nd and 8 from the 26, Derek Carr hits Amari Cooper for a 26-yard touchdown. Sebastian Janikowski hit the extra point, and the Raiders were in the lead for the first time in this game, up 20-17, with about a little less than 7 minutes left still in the third. So now the Packers would get a nice return on the kickoff by Janis. He returned at 47 yards to the Green Bay 47, and Green Bay wasted little time getting into the end zone. They scored off just 3 plays. They ended up with a 2nd and 2 on the 30, and Aaron Rodgers went to James Jones for a 30-yard touchdown. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and now Green Bay was back in the lead, and it was 24-20. So less than a minute, well, just over a minute and 2 seconds after losing the lead, the Packers take the lead right back. So that didn't last too long there. But Oakland would end up punting after 6 plays on their next possession. And now Green Bay would end up taking over after the punt, backed up against their own end zone on their own 5-yard line. They were faced with a 3rd and 5 from the 10, and Aaron Rodgers went to Abracadabra, Aberderis, picked up 13 yards and a first down at the 23. Then on 2nd and 7 from the 26, originally it was an incomplete pass, but Green Bay challenged, and it was ruled a catch, a 9-yard reception by Jones to make it a first down at the 35. And on the final play of the third quarter, a 2nd and 13 from the 32, Rodgers went back to Jones, a 14-yard reception and a first down at the 46. So now Green Bay opened up the fourth quarter. They'd be faced with a 3rd and 1 from the 45, and Cobb on an end-around picked up a first down with a 4-yard run. And so now it was a first down at the 41. Rodgers then went to Jones for another 14-yard reception to make it a first down at the 27. But then a penalty for pass interference against the Packers would push him back to the 37. And on 2nd and 17 from the 34, Aaron Rodgers went to Randall Cobb. He picked up 19 yards in the first down in the red zone at the Oakland 15. Then on 3rd and 6 from the Oakland 11, a defensive pass interference call against the Raiders would make it 1st and goal on the 1 for the Packers. An incomplete pass followed by a 2-yard loss on the ground would make it a 3rd and goal on the 3, and an incomplete pass would bring out Mason Crosby to attempt a 21-yard field goal. He hit the chip shot, and now the Packers were in the lead by 7, 27-20, with 10 minutes left to play in this game. So now the Raiders would take over on their own 16 after the kickoff, but they would end up with a 3rd and 8 on their 28, and Derek Carr was sacked by Julius Peppers, plus a penalty, but that was declined, but that would make it 4th and 22, and Oakland would have to punt from their own 14-yard line. Then a 10-yard return on the punt by Micah Hyde, and a penalty against the Raiders would set the Packers up on the Oakland 36 as they were on the edge of field goal range to begin this possession. Then on 2nd and 7 from the 33, Starks runs it 25 yards for a first down in the red zone at the 8-yard line to make it 1st and goal. They weren't able to get into the end zone, though, as they actually did have a touchdown, but it was reversed as a penalty for offensive pass interference against Jones would take the touchdown off the board, and the Packers would end up having to settle for a 33-yard field goal, which made it 30-20. So Mason Crosby with the field goal with about 4.5 minutes left to play. And now the Raiders would take over after the touchback on the kickoff on their own 20, but on 3rd down, Derek Carr was sacked for a 6-yard loss by Peppers and Neal. And so now they would be faced with a 4th and 14 on their own 16 and down by 10 with 3.5 minutes left to play. The Raiders were forced to go for it, and Derek Carr threw an incomplete pass as Rollins was there to break it up. And so now the Raiders turn the ball over on downs. So the Packers would take over in the red zone on the Oakland 16, and on 2nd and 9 from the Oakland 15, Aaron Rodgers was intercepted by Amerson. And so now the Raiders would take over on their own 1-yard line. As originally it was ruled a touchback, or they were actually challenged to see if it was a touchback, but they said that no, it was down on the 1, so the ruling on the field stand. So now the Raiders would have to start on their own 1-yard line, literally in the shadow of their own end zone as they were lining up in the end zone. Only the ball and the arms of the center were really out of the end zone. But they would end up with a first down on a 2nd and 10 from the 1 when Derek Carr hit Crabtree for an 18-yard reception to bring the ball out to the 19. And on 3rd and 10 from the 19, Carr went back to Crabtree, picked up 11 yards and a first down at the 30 as the game went to the 2-minute warning. But then they would be faced with a 4th and 4 at the 36. Carr went to Reese, but he lost a yard, and that turned the ball over on downs, as now the Packers would take over on the Oakland 35, and they weren't able to pick up a first down, but they went for a field goal, a 49-yard attempt, but it was blocked by Autry, recovered by Lofton, and now the Raiders would take over on their own 39, but there was less than a minute left to play, still down by 2 scores, and they would be faced with a 4th and 5, and they would turn the ball over on downs on an incomplete pass. There's actually a penalty against the Raiders that was declined, and at this point all that was left to do was for Aaron Rodgers to take a knee in the victory formation as the Packers win on the road to clinch a playoff spot, and the Green Bay Packers with the win are now 10-4. So the Packers are in the playoffs. They still haven't quite clinched the division. They have a 1-game lead in the NFC North over Minnesota, but they are definitely assured at least a wild card. And last time the Packers won the Super Bowl, it actually was as a wild card. But they're 5-2 on the road on the season. The Raiders 6-8 now. They are eliminated from playoff contention. They're just 2-5 at home. And in this game, Aaron Rodgers, 22 for 39, just 204 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. James Starks, 9 carries for 51 yards. Eddie Lacy, 11 carries for just 23 yards. And James Jones had 6 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. And Randall Cobb, 5 catches for 40 yards. And Jared Abbrederis, 3 catches for 33 yards. Devontae Adams, 5 catches for 32 yards. And for the Raiders, Derek Carr, 23 for 47, 276 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Latavius Murray, 21 carries for 78 yards. He also had a catch for 2 yards to give him 80 total yards on the day. Carr also had 4 carries for 42 yards on the ground. Amari Cooper went over 1,000 yards on the season in this game, as he had 6 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, as he's only the second Raider receiver to go over 1,000 yards in the last 10 years. Michael Crabtree, 6 catches for 70 yards, and Marcel Reese had 3 catches for 37 yards. We look at the kickers in this game. Mason Crosby, 3 for 4 on the field goals. The only one he missed was that blocked field goal there at the end of the game. Not quite the end, but down the stretch as the game was coming to a close in the last few minutes. He also was 3 for 3 on the extra points, and Sebastian Janikowski, 2 for 2 on the field goals, 2 for 2 in the extra points. And for the defense for the Packers, Randall had a pick 6 off of his interception. Micah Hyde also had an interception. Julius Peppers with 2.5 sacks, and Neal had a half sack. And for the Raiders, Amerson had an interception. Maoa had a forced fumble, and Heaney had a sack, as well as Khalil Mack added another sack to his total. Team stats, 20 first downs for the Raiders, 18 first downs for the Packers, 5 for 17 on 3rd down for Oakland, 29% conversion rate. They went for it 4 times on 4th down, converted just 1 for 25% as they turned the ball over on downs 3 times. And for the Packers, they were 4 for 13 on 3rd down, 30% conversion rate. Total net yards, 372 for Oakland, 293 for Green Bay. Net rushing yards, 120 for the Raiders, 103 for the Packers. And through the air, Oakland netted 252 as Carr was sacked 3 times, losing a total of 24 yards. Rodgers was sacked twice, losing 14 yards as the Packers netted 190. Then we look at the penalties in this game. Penalties really hurt Oakland, as they're known for getting a lot of penalties historically speaking. But they had 10 penalties for 95 yards, 6 penalties against Green Bay for 75 yards. The Packers had 1 fumble, which they did lose. And then we look at the red zone in this game. Both teams struggled. The Packers just 1 for 5 in the red zone, just 20%. And Oakland 1 for 3, just 33% in the red zone. In time of possession, Oakland 30 minutes, 31 seconds. Green Bay 29 minutes, 29 seconds. So the Packers win on the road, and they did it with their defense. They got a big defensive effort, and that was something that they really needed. They had been struggling on the defensive side of the ball, and they needed their defense to really come together, especially with the playoffs right around the corner. They clinched the playoff spot, but they needed their defense to get things going, and they surely did in this game. Of course, those interceptions early on, Micah Hyde, and then, of course, Randall with that pick 6 as he came up big, and that, they scored those 2 touchdowns real quick to take that 14-0 lead in just a matter of 15 seconds. As Green Bay didn't get necessarily a lot of production out of their offense in terms of yards, but their defense put them in good position all game long. Also the special teams, and Mason Crosby just kept kicking those field goals as the game wore on, and they end up coming away with the 10-point victory, a hard-fought win in Oakland over a Raiders team that is underrated. Of course, the Raiders building towards next year, and they're in a tough division there in that AFC West, but the Raiders, a young team that's starting to come together, and the future does look bright for Oakland, but the future is now for Green Bay, and has been. They've clinched their playoff spot for the 7th straight year, and that's actually a record. So Green Bay going back to the playoffs, regardless of if they win the division or not, but they keep pace to take the division as they still have a 1-game lead over Minnesota with 2 games left to play. So it'll be interesting to see how that division shapes up. And even though they didn't get a lot of production out of the ground game, that is still going to be a question mark for the Packers, as Eddie Lacy is struggling. He seemed like he had found himself, but in this game, of course, a tough Oakland defense. But it's probably most likely the division's going to come down to Week 17 when they face the Vikings. Of course, that game is in Green Bay, so there is an advantage there. It's tough to win in Lambeau Field. The Green Bay Packers at home are one of the toughest teams to beat, although they're not perfect at home this year. They did lose that game to Detroit at home and to Chicago, and Minnesota looks to continue that trend, but the Packers right now hitting their stride. They've won the last 3 games in a row, and they've won 4 out of the last 5. Of course, they'll be going to Arizona next week. That's going to be quite the game against the Cardinals, as those 2 teams are going to be battling it out for top spots in the NFC. Of course, the number 1 seed is the Panthers, who are still undefeated. But Green Bay, this win goes a long way towards them winning the division. As I said, they clinched the playoffs. That is what matters the most, is the Packers are a dangerous team once they get to the postseason, as we've already seen. I mean, it was a little while ago, but back in 2010 when they won the Super Bowl as a wild card. So anything is possible in Green Bay moving towards January. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great week and having an excellent weekend, and enjoy all the sports.